There are a lot of people to thank who helped put this event together. I want to thank ECM Design for all the printing of the posters, maps, and schedules. They also designed this year's posters and t-shirt, our website, and maintained our Facebook page. Thanks to the Exeter Area Chamber of Commerce, who is sponsoring the trolley out to the incident site in Kensington. Thank you to Trends Gallery and Gifts and Krypton Comics here on Water Street. Please visit their shops. Also, thank you to all the merchants up and down Water Street who have supported us over the years. A special thank you this year to Peter Robbins, who will be our MC. He helped me greatly through this process. An additional thanks to Charles Creteau from Seacoast Saucers, who also helped me a great deal during this process. It's my first year doing this, so I thank them both. Last and certainly not least, I want to thank all of this year's speakers. Thank you for helping us raise money for local children's charities and programs. Thank you for spreading the word about this event on your websites, blogs, podcasts, and radio shows. Your dedication to us is immeasurable. Thank you very much. Finally, thank you for all of your suggestions. We really tried to implement as many of them as possible. We are all volunteers doing this, and this is only my first time doing this, so as a group, our fifth time. We've learned a lot from you, and we'll get better. Once again, welcome to Exeter. Enjoy your stay, listen, and learn. Now a few words about Peter Robbins. It is my pleasure to introduce Peter Robbins. Peter Robbins is an investigative writer who has specialized in the subject for more than 35 years. He is a regular guest on American and British radio shows and has appeared as a guest on and been consultant to numerous television shows and documentaries. Peter has lectured extensively both here and abroad for local and regional UFO groups and libraries, and at venues that have included the Cambridge Hospital in Boston, Cornell University, the Juilliard School and School of Visual Arts in New York City, the Royal College of Science and Technology, London, the Universities of Cardiff, Leeds, Hallam, Glasgow, and Summerhill School in Suffolk, UK, the Forum in Brazil, and the Exobiology International Meeting in Milan, Italy. He's given presentations in Rome, Athens, Paris, Bordeaux, Toulouse, and Nice, France. In conference, Bud Hopkins Intruders Foundation's conference and seminars, and the McMinnville, Oregon UFO Festival and Conference, the Crash Retrieval UFO Conference, the Experiencers Speak Conference, and the International UFO Congress in Phoenix. In 2012, he was made a member of the French Académie de Ufology, and in 2013 invited to give testimony at the citizens' hearings on disclosure at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. Robbins was a member of the advisory board of the late Bud Hopkins Intruders Foundation, was editor-in-chief of the groundbreaking website UFOcity.com, event coordinator for the Sci-Fi Channel's Alien Abduction Phenomenon Symposium, promoting the miniseries Taken, advisor to the McMinnville Oregon UFO Festival, and is a former consultant to the mayor's office of the city of Roswell, New Mexico. He is proud to have been co-founder of Travis Walton's Skyfire UFO Summit, and along with his friend and colleague Dean Merchant, a co-founder of this Exeter UFO Festival and Conference. It's my pleasure to welcome back and introduce our conference MC and speaker, Peter Robbins.
I have to say for myself, it's wonderful to be back in Exeter. I speak at a lot of events here and abroad. This is one of my favorites for a number of reasons, and not the least of which is that unlike any other conference or event that I speak at, every cent beyond expenses and bringing our speakers in goes to children's services in this town, and that is something everybody should be proud of. For us in the UFO research community, it's golden. It's doing community service besides helping to educate folks on the seriousness and the implications of the subject of UFOs. There are a handful of communities across America that own the rights to have events like this. Probably best known as Roswell, New Mexico, McMinnville, Oregon, a little tiny hamlet in New York State, not far from where I live, called Pine Bush, and a number of others. The incident at Exeter is truly one of the most important in the history of this subject, and the chronicling of it by the great journalist John Fuller is one of the finest pieces of UFO literature out there, not to mention the fact of the association with the world-famous Betty and Barney Hill abduction. These things are real, and they happen to folks just like you and me. And so it's perfect that we begin our day with these two very special people, Chuck and Valerie, who represent Seacoast Saucers of New England. I was part of the very first UFO abduction support group going back to the 1980s that was started by the late, great investigative researcher Bud Hopkins. So I know something about what it takes to offer these services to folks. Seacoast Saucers of New England is a New Hampshire-based organization focused on providing support for individuals and families in the New England region who have had abduction and encounter experiences. Seacoast Saucers has steadily worked on creative campaigns to change the social stigma of the topic into a global reality through support, education, and awareness. Seacoast Saucers continually strives to create a safe environment to have difficult conversations in regarding the abduction phenomena and contact experiences. Please, a warm welcome for these two terrific people.
Well, hello, everybody. My name's Chuck Creteau, and this is Valerie Lofaso, and we are part of Seacoast Saucers of New England. Just a show of hands, how many people have heard of us before? Oh my God, that's like half the room. I'm so impressed. We didn't pay anybody, believe it or not. There was no payment to get half the people in this room to raise their hands. Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for whoever got you all the coffee to get up this morning and put that IV in each one of your arms so that you're here at 8:30 on a Saturday. So we are Seacoast Saucers, and a little bit about what we're here to talk about today. We're here, and our lecture today is about commonalities, synchronicities, and modern-day contact. What can we learn from contactees and experiencers? So what does that mean? Wow, that's a really hefty title for our lecture today, isn't it? Actually, what we're here to talk about is to share some stories. Everybody likes a good story, and what we've been doing for the past 5 years or so, both Valerie and myself, is we've been holding meetups and talking to people that have had various experiences through their life. So what is an experiencer? What is a contactee? Well, it's somebody that's had an experience in some fashion. So it could be seeing a light in the sky. It could be literally having an abduction experience. Any one of these things might fit into that view. So today what we're going to talk a little bit about are those synchronicities, the commonalities in the stories that we hear from people who've had experiences and what that looks like. What do we do? Support the experiencers and the contactees. We hold actually monthly meetup groups, believe it or not, in which right here in New Hampshire, people can come once a month. You can look at meetup.com, or you can find us on our webpage, Seacoast Saucers on Facebook. And in fact, if you want to take out your smartphone right now, we won't hold it against you. Like us on Facebook, Seacoast Saucers. And what we do is we hold group meetings where you can talk about the same stuff that you paid money to come here to talk about every single month with other people that are interested in the topic. So we do that. We do social gatherings. Believe it or not, we just had, has anybody here ever heard of the Far Out Diner in Dover, New Hampshire? Oh my God, we got 5 or 6 people. That's cool. I want everybody to raise their hand next year. The best breakfast you're ever going to have is right in Dover, New Hampshire. It's called the Far Out Diner, and we actually just held an event last month where we sold the place out. Everybody came from all around. We helped support the Kiwanis, who put this on every year, and it was just an amazing time. So we do stuff like that, social gatherings. We also do Skywatch events. So sometimes people say, hey, you know, it's going to be a new moon on this date. Why don't we try to get everybody together in this field and maybe get together, do a meditation, see what kind of happens. So we've done that a few times. We do speaking engagements a lot like this, and hold monthly meetings, which we kind of already talked about, to discuss ufology. A lot of the time when we have meetings, people will come in, and as you can imagine, if they're going to share a very personal story that's very true to them, they don't just want to share it with everybody and then have somebody come to a lecture like this and have that person share it with everybody, right? So we employ confidentiality as best as we can. What we say to everybody that comes to a meeting is we ask everybody to have confidentiality and not share each other's stories, but at the same time, we can't guarantee person A isn't going to share person B. So why do we talk about that today? Because every story that we will be sharing with you today from people that we have worked with or talked to, we have permission to share those stories, or to the extent that we're sharing them. So we take confidentiality very seriously because these are people's stories. And the last thing that we want is people not to feel that we are trustworthy and doing what is needed for them.
Hi. So, difficulty of knowing what is contact. I'm sure if any of you here have ever seen something or had an experience, you know how difficult it can be to actually convince yourself, let alone other people, that your experience was real. To start with, UFO doesn't mean it's alien. It's something unidentified in the sky that you can't tell what it is. It might be alien, it might not be alien. You don't know. So that makes it very challenging. We're hearing a lot of people talking more about meditation experiences where they encounter beings, they end up on ships, they have these experiences that are very ambiguous. When you meditate, you're the only one in your head. You're the only one seeing this. You're the only one experiencing it. So it can be very hard to validate an experience like that. Same with dream states and memories. I'll talk a little bit later about a memory that I have of an encounter that for years I thought was a dream, but I don't remember actually ever dreaming it. And synchronicities led me to the conclusion that it was an actual experience. And again, I'll talk more about that a little later. We also have the problem of the culture that we live in, where if you talk about these things, you get laughed at, you get ridiculed, people roll their eyes, they go, oh God, here's another crazy UFO person, So that makes it hard to talk about, to validate, to justify that your experience was your experience. So that can be very challenging. To know what is contact, to understand I was actually contacted by something. Do you guys know what we're talking about when we talk about synchronicity? Is anybody unclear on what synchronicity is? Okay, so we'll do a definition. Synchronicity is a concept first introduced by analytical psychologist Carl Jung, which holds that events are meaningful coincidences if they occur with no causal relationship yet seem to be meaningfully related. Some examples would be the same numbers keep showing up over and over again. 11:11, we all see that come up on the clock, right? I'm sure everybody here has experienced that. 4:44 is another one that I've heard a lot of people is very significant in their life. Another example of synchronicity. You meet someone out of the blue who talks about an event or says something which sounds like answers to questions that you had just been asking yourself, and it has meaning to you. Perfect timing, when things just happen when you need them most. And help and support appear in your life when you least expect it, often from people you've never met before. Synchronicity is just feeling like you were put in the right place at the right time. Some things you can do to recognize synchronicities in your life, because they happen to all of us all the time. Think less and feel more. I'm an empathic medium. All I do is feel. Let me tell you, it's not always fun. But recognizing synchronicities it can be a struggle even for someone like me, not to completely blow it off, to feel the meaning behind it. And listen to your intuition. We all have intuition, that gut instinct telling us this is something meaningful. Listen to that, look into it, question it.
Just to touch on the synchronicity for a second, can anybody name the 2000 Hollywood movie from M. Night Shyamalan that was all about synchronicities? Signs. Who said that? Gold star over there. So here's a movie. For those of you who haven't seen it, I'm going to totally spoil it for you. Sorry to do that. Here is a character played by Mel Gibson whose daughter leaves these glasses filled with water all over this house. She thinks there's germs and parasites in it. She always leaves them around the house. He has a brother, this girl's uncle, who is an ex-baseball player who denies his gift of playing baseball. And his own wife is dying and gives him this cryptid message that it isn't until the end, when you realize this alien's going to kill this child, that all of these things come together in a perfect synchronicity to lead to a point in which they save this child's life. And that is probably the best example for those of you that have never dealt with synchronicity as to how it is these things almost come into our life in ways that we don't understand. But if we follow those, I call them spiritual breadcrumbs, then what tends to happen is something that can be very profound in people's lives. Well, you're probably wondering, well, what the heck does that have to do with a UFO festival and why we're here? Well, believe it or not, a lot of the stories that people share with us from our groups have to do with synchronicities. And I find it fascinating, to be quite honest with you. So the first story that we would like to share with you folks is, I call it Gabby's story, because Gabby she's a good friend. She's somebody that had been coming to our groups for about 3 years. It all started when Gabby started coming to our groups and she started saying, what are these Pleiadians that everybody's talking about? And of course, a bunch of people in the group perk up. And you see a whole bunch of people talking about, well, Pleiadians are this group of alleged aliens, and sometimes people think that they are Pleiadians themselves in their lives, and they're close to nature, and they tend to, be very spiritual. And as we're going through this list of what people identify as Pleiadians, she's just like, that's me, that's me, that's me, I'm drawn to the water, that's me. And over time, she would come to group once in a while, and she would share her story. Essentially, her story was, and one night she was sharing this story, she had, over time, started to be drawn to a place very close to here, actually, the Seacoast. And if you can see this picture right here on your left, there's a picture of this rock and this beach. And she would go to this area, not too far from here in the Seacoast, and she would just kind of go, sit, meditate, and sit quietly. And she would do this for a while. And then suddenly something started to happen. She started to see these little lights in the sky appear. Once they started to appear, they kind of started to grow, and she saw more and more of these things. And she also started to feel as though she was being tested, like little things were going on in her life that had gotten her to that point already. And she had already kind of, as things developed in her life, said, okay, I'm going to just honor whatever's happening to me that got me to this spot. And as things developed, she would see more and more things going on. Well, one night she was actually driving her car, and she heard a woman scream, and she got out of the car, and there was absolutely nobody there. There was literally no person around. It was nighttime. And later, she told us that she felt she was being told that that was a test. It was a test for her to see if fear was going to stop her from having an experience. And it didn't. In fact, that night, she saw more of these lights in the sky. And as she started coming to group, her experiences started to morph, and her understanding about what she felt this was all about. As she started sharing her story in this group one night, another woman came in who had never been part of the group before and had not heard her story, and sat down and kind of monopolized the time that we were all talking. And she started talking about a beach that she went to, and that she had started to get into meditation, and that she had started seeing lights, and that she had had this weird experience with a man that she felt might not even be human for all she knew, and that all of these weird experiences started happening to her on this beach. Granted, it was not the same beach, but as she started telling her story, and she had missed the prior story, she didn't know that another woman had been sharing the same exact story, but a different beach. It was quite fascinating. So we're sitting here, kind of all in a meeting, in a group, going, you two definitely have to talk. Sure enough, they do talk. And even though they don't know each other, they'd been having very similar experiences for at least a few years. And Gabby, who I knew pretty well at this point, said, Chuck, I think I'm going to go with her and take her to my beach. I'm feeling drawn. I need to go do that. And I'm just going to see what happens because it feels right. And I said, well, you do what you got to do, but you call me if she starts to mug you or something, because we don't know who she is. That's the me. I'm always looking out for people, I guess. But essentially, they go to the beach, and I start getting texts from Gabby the next morning. And what you're looking at are literally some of the pictures that she sent me. And what you have over here on the left, let's see if I can get really close, is, see these little dots right here? Normally, those would look just like stars. Everybody agree? But when I do a close-up, these stars are actually moving in a pattern. And these are just taken on your regular phone camera, so we're not going to be looking at high quality pictures at all. But this is what they experienced that night. It was quite fascinating. And as we get to know Gabby and her story a little bit better, we started looking into a few things. And what we realized was the year before, almost to the day, we had had multiple sightings from multiple people. In fact, we even had newspaper articles showing the same exact objects of multiple people sighting them over the Hampton Beach area. So if you look over here on your left, this is actually taken from a report in July of 2013 in which somebody saw over the horizon off the coast of Rye, New Hampshire. He and his girlfriend were from Massachusetts, headed up, and they saw two objects appear over the horizon. These are not his pictures. These are Gabby's pictures once again. But over here, and this is just prior to Gabby, she was actually, during this time, she was having her experiences in Hampton. These pictures were taken by bystanders who had witnessed over the Hampton-Rye area multiple lights in the sky and UFOs, exactly what Gabby, and then later on, Gabby and this other woman had been seeing and experiencing and literally having conversations with. So why do we talk about that? Well, a lot of people think in modern day era of like the Betty and Barney Hill, like people are just abducted in the middle of the night, they're experimented on, they're dropped off, and there's missing time. And some of those things very well may be happening. But today, what we're finding is there is a very spiritual element to many of the people's stories that are having encounters. And it's different for everybody. In fact, a lot of the people that come to our groups, first they start with, I don't even know if this is an experience, it just feels really weird. And like Valerie had alluded, sometimes people have these weird dreams and they don't even know if it's reality, but it doesn't feel like a dream. So it really leads us to the question of what is contact? I think it's fair to say that with everything that's going on today, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, they're looking at radio waves through space. And maybe what we should be doing is looking inward, because there's so much that we still have to discover with how our own minds work. So the yellow Mustang story. Anybody in here familiar with this story? I know one guy in the back. Okay, there's a few people in here that have actually heard this story. So I would just like to take a second and say that we lost somebody this year that was very special to us in our group, and her name was Carol Adams. Carol passed away from cancer this year. And before she passed away, I had the honor of being able to interview her at her request, and for a side project I do called the Galileo Interviews. Carol is an absolutely beautiful person. We knew she was going to pass quite a while before it happened. So we were able to get that story, the Yellow Mustang story, out of her. She had started coming to groups years prior. And one thing that everybody really honored and loved about Carol was she had this gift for just laughing through anything, no matter how strange it was. And I could tell you the first time I ever heard this story, it absolutely blew me away because of all these strange occurrences that were happening. So, Chuck, why don't you get to the story? Well, I will. In fact, I'm not even going to tell you her story. I'm going to let her tell you the story. This is Carol Adams. This is the only video of her describing an incident that happened to her. And I'm going to let her, in her own words, tell you a little bit about what happened to her one night in roughly 1981.
When I was married back in 1981, my son was 3 months old, and my husband at the time and I were living in South Carolina. And we're coming up for my sister's wedding in Bartlett, New Hampshire. So we had a yellow Mustang that Bob, my husband, had recently purchased without informing me first. So we have this car and we're roaring up the map. We've got about 5 days leave because he's in the Coast Guard. So as we drive up the map, and my little son's in the back seat all bundled up, we're probably 3 a.m. in the middle of nowhere. I have no idea where we were, but the windshield wiper washers broke, and it was just a torrential downpour. So we skidded to a stop and pulled into this abandoned gas station. So as we did, we're like, we're screwed. I mean, no cell phone, very little money, a new baby in the back seat. It's the middle of the night. There's nobody. This is like a ghost town. So within seconds, this yellow Mustang, a lemon yellow Mustang, like ours, pulls up right beside us. And this man gets out. And I have never seen such a perfect specimen in my life. So this man was beautiful. He came up, he had a leather coat, like a bomber, and he had it over his head, and he had soft blonde curls and the most beautiful blue eyes you've ever seen. They didn't even look human. But he was human, or looked human. But he was just astounding. And he said, "Can I help you?" And we were like, "Yeah," while our wipers broke. And he said, "Oh, I had the same thing happen with my Mustang not too long ago. I'll go fix them." So we went to his trunk and got some tools. All I remember is that he waved us off and said, "You're all set." Gets into his car and drove off the way he came. So the thing is, though, about 3 or 4 months ago, I was prompted by someone at Social Saucers to say, why not ask your ex-husband if he remembers anything odd about that incident? So I emailed Bob and I said, "Do you remember anything odd about the yellow Mustang incident?" And I refreshed his memory a little bit.
And Bob is your ex-husband,
He's
just
my
to preface this a
ex-husband.
little. How long has it been since you've talked to him at this point?
I hadn't talked to him in probably maybe 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And had you ever brought this up with him prior?
Never brought it up before.
So there was no conversation around this?
Nothing.
And what did he say?
He says, actually there was something odd. He said, "I mapped out that entire trip because we had X amount of hours to complete the trip and get home in one piece." But he said, "I cannot account for 10 hours. And he said, "We got there 10 hours late." And I could never figure that out, and it's bothered me all these years. And I'm like, bingo, missing time.
So literally there were 10 hours in which you don't know where they went.
No.
Did you arrive late to this wedding?
No, we were on time. The thing is, we got there so late. It was like, again, if it's 10 hours behind schedule, whether you're ready to go to a wedding or not, something's got to give. So if I recall, it was like the wee hours of the morning by the time we got there. And so we missed our sleep. I mean, everything was screwed up. So but it's vague because I remember the Mustang part, but not the trip afterwards. Because
So you were driving the same exact year, make, and model
exact same
as the car that pulls up to you.
Exact same car.
And what year did this happen in, do you think?
1981.
And why are you so sure about that?
Because my son was 3 months old and he was born in 1981.
That's a pretty good reason why.
That's a pretty good reason. Can pin that one.
So, you had also said, and this is just a side note, when you talk about this blonde guy, you had referenced what he looked like, and I've always gotten a kick out of it.
Yeah.
Who is it that he reminded you of back in 1981?
This is like Peter Frampton on his best day. There ain't no one like him.
So he looked just like
Gorgeous.
a perfect Peter Frampton.
Perfect Peter Frampton.
In 1981. So
Absolutely.
Peter Frampton, you were out there, and this was you. It's time going up. I think you need to give Carol a call. She deserves a phone call saying, "Yes, that was me, and I did fix your windshield wipers, and you're welcome." I'm pretty
There you
sure
go.
she would welcome that phone call. Is that fair to
I
say?
would welcome with open arms. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's great.
Exactly.
Is there anything else to add to the Yellow Mustang story?
That is it. And I think the most important thing was that I really felt that our little family was being watched by something outside of the norm. And that it was such a sweet little gift because it could have been a disaster. I mean, it was the middle of the night. I've got this little baby who's sound asleep, and I'm like, I don't have a cell phone. I can't call anybody. You know, you're vulnerable. And then something was there to meet your needs. So,
And that little baby grew up to be your son, who you just referenced not too long ago.
exactly. 36 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story.
Thank you very much.
So that was Carol's story. Let me also say something. She says she felt very protected. She was also referencing a time in which she told me in that same interview, and you can go to the Galileo interviews on Facebook at any point, and you can find links to the YouTube channel as well. If you'd like to see the full interview, I would encourage you to do so. She was referencing, actually, that in her life, she had had times in which her mother had told her, specific times in which she felt strangers intervened to save her mother's life. In fact, she talked about one time in which her mother was at a bar, somebody had slipped a Mickey into her drink, and a stranger had stopped a potential rape from happening and gotten her out of the situation totally and really absolutely saved her life. And there were other times in which this had possibly happened. So when she's saying she felt as though somebody was watching her family, she literally felt that way. So it's really fascinating to hear her in her own words, and boy, we do miss her. So that brings us to what happened. So she shared this story in our group one day, and believe it or not, there was a woman who, I don't have permission to tell her whole story or any identifiable information, so I can't, but what I can tell you is there was a woman that only came to our group one time and heard that story, and she immediately perked up, and she said, "The same thing has happened to me." She went on to tell her story, and the similarities were absolutely amazing. She said that she was going to a different state. She had 3 friends with her. She was driving a white Volkswagen Beetle. They broke down coming back from somewhere. A car, she doesn't know what broke, but she knows that this other car with a man pulled up, and he was in the same year, same make, same model vehicle that she was driving of that white Volkswagen Beetle. And this man pulls right up, produces the part, says, "I can fix your car for you." Her friends seemed oblivious to everything that was going on. And every time she tried to look at this man's face, guess what happened? He would always turn, or he would go this way. She was never able to ID what he looked like. And again, she doesn't know how she got back to where she was. Another example of missing time. So this woman was in this group hearing this, and then obviously Carol hears that, and they started talking. And then we found out another individual who's a very close friend, I can't confirm or deny he's here today, he very well may be, has allowed me to share his story, and I will simply say that this individual himself has had many experiences. He has had missing time on occasions, and it wasn't until he started really thinking about these stories in which he said, you know, there was a time, a long time ago, in I think the 70s, which he was riding his motorcycle through like some sort of a dirt path, and his motorcycle broke down. And wouldn't you know, soon after, a man on the same possibly year, definitely same make and model, pulled up, asked him if he was okay, and instead of helping him said, "Here, I have this toolbox. I'm going to lend this to you. Fix your motorcycle. If you are here when I come back, I'll give you a ride. And if not, just leave the tools right here, and I will come back and I will take those tools. I wish you luck." And, I mean, he was in the middle of nowhere. What are you going to do? And he was able to fix his motorcycle. And he did say to me, look, to be quite honest, I'm not sure if there was missing time doing this. I have to be honest. But it is also possible that it could have happened. So when we look at those 3 stories, we start seeing this pattern in a certain story. And I want to be really clear with everybody here. We're not diagnosing this. We are not saying these are alien encounters, because we don't know. What we do know is it fits a pattern. And that pattern is as follows. In each case, the person has a past history involving alleged encounters with UFOs or missing time. In Carol's case, and if you ever watch the video on the Galileo interviews, you will see that in her youth, they used to all stay in her father's boat. And there were times in which she was found on the deck of the boat in the middle of the night, and nobody knew how she got there. And this would happen so often, they would try to lock her in a room. There's also a need for emergency assistance in all of these cases. In all cases, it's like the vehicle shuts down, something's broken, but an individual who isn't clearly identified appears in a time of need, produces the exact item that is needed, but also shows up in the same year, make, and model vehicle as the person who is in need. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that could possibly be, because really, we're not here to diagnose these things or to tell you what to believe. We're just here to give you the stories and let you form your own decisions as to what that possibly could be. In all cases, tools or the exact item that is needed are given, or the vehicle is fixed on the spot. In some cases, the individual is hiding their face, or it's hard to make out identifying details about that person's feature. Well, I think Carol knew what the guy looked like. He looked like Peter Frampton on his best day. I hope you caught that. And I still get a kick out. I used to say to Carol, Carol, tell me what did he look like again? And she'd go, oh, stop it. I loved having her tell it because she just started to glow when she talked about it. But yeah, this was this blonde, curly-haired, beautiful specimen of a person. And for those of you that are into ufology, there is a name for those types of aliens that people often refer to as Nordics. So actually, I was showing Kathy Martin this a little bit earlier, and she goes, oh, it's probably a Nordic. I was like, yeah, maybe. So it could be, but we don't want to diagnose it. We simply want to say, well, that's what we know. Missing time is either involved or believed to have happened in most, if not all, of the cases. In many of the cases, it feels as though that there is a positive interaction in which they were protected by some unknown force. And I think it's really important that we look at that, because in today, we hear these stories, or we hear about alien abduction or missing time, and we immediately go to, that's horrible, this person's being hurt. In these cases, whatever happened, these creatures, people, whatever they were, maybe they were all just people acting really odd in the perfect time and place with the same exact vehicle, make, model. But they all were there to help. And there's also a strong sense that it was meant to happen, or the events or synchronicities happened in the right order so that they could accomplish whatever their goal had to be. So you almost wonder, because there are so many theories out there, from holographic reality to multi-dimensional theory, which there's an infinite number of you happening in infinite ways, maybe these things had to happen for certain things to continue in that person's life. So we'll talk a little bit about those theories. Meditation and modern day encounters.
One of the most significant personal encounters that I've had was around meditation, skywatches, and the CE5 initiative. If you don't know what the CE5 initiative is, it's contact through meditation, asking for benevolent beings to come through. So Chuck and I, along with a couple other people, had started kind of an experiment where we would meet weekly. We would do a meditation to a track that actually is believed to come from the stars and planets. So we would do this meditation weekly as a group, and then we would do it almost daily on our own at home. And then after, 6 months of doing this, a few of us went to the top of a mountain in upstate New Hampshire, and we put our intent out there, after weeks and weeks of doing this, having missing time, having similar visuals come through in the meditation. So we're out on this mountaintop saying, okay, it seems like you've been hearing us. Can you show us something? And we sat there for a while, and nothing happened. Just watching the skies, getting later and later. We're on a mountaintop, so we're starting to get damp too, because the dew's coming out, and we're getting more and more sleepy. And we're about to say, okay, maybe we should call it a night and say, okay, this was a fun experience. And then I saw something just to the right of the tree line that was flashing red, white, and green. And it was a little bit bigger than a star. And I watched it for a minute, and then I called the attention of the rest of the group, and I said, guys, do planets or stars do that? And they all looked at it, and as soon as everybody focused on it, it started dancing in the sky. And we watched it dance for 45 minutes. People always say, it could have been a drone. Yeah, could have been. Could have been a lot of things. Several of us there are intuitives, and we all kind of reached out to our spiritual team to say, what are we looking at? And we got validation from our spiritual teams that, yeah, you're being given a gift right now. So we watched 45 minutes, along with it dancing. When a plane would come by, because there was a line, like a traffic pattern for airplanes. When a plane would come by, it would stay white and it would stand still, and it wouldn't move. And when the plane was out of sight, it would start dancing again. I don't think a drone would do that. I don't know why a drone would care if a plane was going by. So we thought that was kind of odd. And there was another incident towards the end where I was looking straight at it. Everybody else's focus, they said their eyes were wandering a little further over. I saw something red shoot out of this dancing light. The other 3 people saw the sky light up red in the direction of where this red thing went. We asked it collectively, silently with our minds, if it would make a circle, because it was very erratic. It wasn't doing any sort of pattern. And it made a teardrop shape. Pretty close. Maybe it was something, maybe it wasn't. But it was very profound for us. Everybody asked, did you take pictures? No, we all had our phones with us. Not a single one of us pulled out a camera. Why? Because it was for us. It wasn't to convince anybody else that this happened. This was for us to validate that what we were doing was working. So that was pretty cool. So one of the questions we have up here is, why meditation? Well, there's a lot of possibilities around why meditation seems to help in these cases. A lot of people believe meditation helps raise your vibration, and that these entities are at a higher vibration, so it's easier to reach out to them. We have the collective consciousness. When you're all meditating with the same intent to reach out, you're putting out a stronger signal than if it's just you putting out that intent. And a lot of people believe that these entities can communicate mind to mind. So when you're meditating, you're focusing on this communication, mind to mind, instead of verbal, the way I'm speaking right now. And it does seem that more and more people are coming into our groups, and they're talking about similar situations where they're meditating and they're making contact, either purposefully or out of the blue, not asking for it, and it happens. That's happened to me. I've gone into meditations. I haven't asked for ETs to come through, and then I have one standing in front of me. It does seem to be something coming up more and more, whether it's happening more or if people are just getting more comfortable talking about it, we're not quite sure. What does this all mean, and what can we learn? So I think something I want to point out here is that, a lot of the examples that we've given so far are pretty cut and dry. They're easy to recognize. They happened, very obviously to these people. But I've had my own synchronicities come up around a contact I had with my father when I was a very small child. I mentioned it earlier. It was something I thought for a long time might have been a dream, but it was a very, very vivid memory. I always say, I think I was 3 or 4 when it happened, but my gut is always like, no, I was 4 years old. I don't know why I know that, but I was 4 years old when it happened. So I was always kind of not sure about this memory until I started going to the social groups that we've talked about. And I started listening to other people's stories, and I heard somebody describe something very, very similar to what I experienced with my father. And so I kind of started going, maybe that's not just a dream. Maybe that really was something more. Didn't put too much thought or reading into it, just kind of went, okay, maybe it was something more. Continued over the years to go to these events. And then we had the wonderful Dean Merchant, who I think was mentioned before as one of the co-founders of this festival. He is a fantastic resource. If you haven't met him, he is an amazing resource for UFO history in this area. And he came into our social group one time with a map of hotspots in this area. And the encounter I had with my father was smack dab in the middle of that hotspot. And I went, oh, okay, this is becoming a little more significant. And then I started remembering other incidents that I had in the same area. So all these pieces came very slowly. It wasn't a smack-in-your-face synchronicity. But I do feel one of the things Chuck talked about earlier was that you feel like you were put in these places at the right time for a reason. And I definitely felt like these pieces were handed to me. I wasn't looking for them. They were given to me. So I find that very significant. So, if you haven't had these amazing, life-changing synchronicities, well, take a look at other things that have happened in your life. It may have been like mine and happened more slowly, but it's still there. So contact is not always physical. We've talked about that quite a bit. Meditation, dreams. We may have been having contact and not know it. That is possible. We have people come in, Chuck mentioned before, we've had people come into our group saying, I've had this really weird experience. I don't know if it's ET, UFO, but it's really weird and it doesn't fit any other category. Is it possible that fear gets in the way? God, I hate fear. Fear is definitely, there's so many ways fear can get in the way. We have, first of all, the fear of ridicule, the fear of judgment, of talking about it in front of the wrong person. That's a big fear. And then fear of, I know many people who are like, I'm afraid of aliens. Okay, why? Have you met one? Like, was one mean to you? No, so why are you afraid of them? But people are afraid of the unknown, and that's very common, and that's okay. But that can also prevent you from understanding fully an experience. Social controls. This is one of our favorites, right, Chuck? I don't know if you want to talk a little bit on this.
So when we talk a little bit about social controls that lead people to not having, i.e., contact. So think about the Hollywood movies that come out today. What are the first few UFO-related Hollywood movies that people think of? Go ahead and shout out some names. Anybody? Go ahead and shout them. I'm sorry, over here? All right, good one. Over here, somebody said something? Fire in the Sky, good one. Independence Day. Somebody over here, say that again. War of the Worlds. Close Encounters. All right, interesting, right? So what's really interesting is usually the first thing people say is War of the Worlds, right? You hear Independence Day. And what are those films really about when you look at how aliens are interacting with the human race? Fear? What else? Say that, aggression? Yeah. So we have been kind of brought up with a lot of those movies through the years. And peppered within those movies, you'll get the ETs, you'll get Close Encounters of a Third Kind. And even most recently, how many people have seen Contact that came out about 2 or 3 years ago? Raise your hand. So a little less than half of the people here. So how does that impact us when from an early age we're raised to believe aliens are going to come, they're going to take our resources, kill off everybody on Earth? What does that do? Well, it starts to condition the masses to believe that this is something that not only is not happening, but if it ever were to happen, it would be detrimental to the human race. They would be aggressive. But then once in a while you have something like E.T. or Close Encounters coming out that actually does it some justice and looks at the possibility of them not wanting to kill. And what does that do, though? Well, it instills fear. I think we can all agree that when you see a movie like that, it's not raising your vibration, it's kind of bringing it down a little bit. And I want to go back to Gabby's story for a minute, because hers isn't the only one in which I have heard someone talk about. It was almost like I was being tested for fear. In fact, we hear that quite often from people that have had experiences. It's a commonality. What they say is there was a certain time in which things were going on that this thing happened to me. In Gabby's case, she heard a woman scream, pulls over, looks around, there's absolutely nobody around, it's nighttime, and she gets the sense that that was to test to see where she was so that she could continue to go down the route and the synchronicities that led her there. And she even said to us later, she said, if that hadn't happened, I probably would have been very fearful that something would have happened to me. But it helped me kind of test myself to make sure that I was ready to continue to have some strange experiences. In fact, a lot of people say, I really wish an alien would abduct me. And my old friend Mike Stevens is around here somewhere, but he used to say, who the hell wants to be abducted? Nobody's... It's not an abduction if you want it, he says. And he's right, we are brought up to think that these things are going to be these evil creatures, and unfortunately it does condition us into that. So we have to wonder when we start hearing people say, yeah, I almost feel like I was being tested to make sure I wasn't afraid of these experiences. Is there something to that? If you were an alien race, how would you engage with a developing race? Well, that really is the question that I'd love to ask people, because what is the human race about? And I want people to really think about that good. What are we known for? Are we known for our peace, or are we known for our war? We're an aggressive race. Unfortunately, not all people are, I should say, fortunately, we're not all aggressive, but that is probably our number one commodity in this world, is constant warfare. We separate each other. We don't feel connected to each other. We cut people off on our way to work, right? We get very upset over the little things. And I almost wonder if something greater hasn't been happening, but we don't pay attention to it. In almost all of these experiences, we're hearing stories in which people are saved. We're hearing stories in which people need to shed the fear, and they need to become either more spiritual or sit with their own thoughts more. And time again, we hear that people are having these experiences in meditation, in dream states. And I have to ask this question, and hopefully it resonates with some of you here today. If you really wanted to find the people that were ready for contact, would you go to the scientists? Would you try to contact through a radio station? Or would you look for the ones that have shed the fear, that are not aggressive, and try to let them come to you? And if they do have a greater understanding of how what we would look at as science works, and if there is anything to multidimensional theory or alternate realities or even the holographic reality, which we'll talk a little bit about, well, maybe they are putting these breadcrumbs, these synchronicities in line for us when we are ready and able to have some sort of contact. And that is something I would just like everybody to think about and hopefully leave here today. So theories and possibilities around what this all could be. Is it a physical being coming a long distance, or possibly a dimensional or alternative world being traveling short distances? So when we think UFOs and aliens, the first thing that the average person thinks when they hear about UFOs is, it can't happen because there's long distances and blah, blah, blah. You hear it all the time. Well, what if it's not about these creatures that are physical creatures that are coming here these long distances from other galaxies? But like, is anybody here not heard of Paul and Ben Eno? Because they will be speaking later on. I highly recommend you go to their lecture. I believe it's today. Because they will be talking a lot about what they call flap areas. These are areas in which ghosts are seen, strange lights in the sky, UFO abductions, Bigfoot, Sasquatch. Believe it or not, there are areas in Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, even in New Hampshire, there's an area in which people see and have a long, over 100-year history of witnessing all of these things, and they're called flap areas. And he's been investigating this for over 30 years. And one of his conclusions, I guess you could say, is that we're dealing with multidimensional theory. That means these membranes of different worlds intersect, and what we are seeing when we see ghosts sometimes is actually something in another reality that bleeds through. And I almost wonder if what we're seeing here are other beings that have learned how to manipulate some of these things. In fact, we could have something walking around us right now that we don't see, but has the ability to witness us in this dimension or this reality. So that's the first thing that we have to start asking ourselves. Is that possible? Is that a possibility? Or is it just distance like we all are led to believe? Next question is are we all connected? I'm just going to ask this in shoot from the hip here. Raise your hand if you've ever had an experience in which you felt totally connected to another person, whether it be like twins talk about, identical twins where they feel pain, or you're thinking of somebody and that person called you up immediately and it was just like, wow, I can't believe that person just called me. Something in which you felt totally connected and you can't explain. I would say more than half of the people in this room have had something like that happen. About 75 to 80%. Well, why is that? Why is it that we become so connected to people that we almost know what they're thinking sometimes? You see this in so many different ways. In fact, I was just talking with Mark D'Antonio, who will be speaking later today, and he said, you know, Chuck, quantum entanglement theory would solve a lot of that. He said, if you take this fork and you split it in half, and I take this fork on this side and you take it down there, and you do something about the polarity of A, B, and C within the molecules in this, those two actually both will change at the exact same moment when that happens. And I said, wow, it's really over my head. But that would explain a lot of why sometimes things are connected.
It's called quantum entanglement.
Quantum entanglement, thank you. So when we look at these things, there's so much that science, if brought into the equations of listening to people's stories, might start to figure out. We just need the people from each side to come together and to, in a healthy way, look at some of these things. So are we all connected? Is it possible that we're also connected to them, and they're trying to communicate with us at times, but we don't realize it through dreams or anything. Are we thinking one-dimensionally as a UFO community with labels like UFO when contact is happening all around us? So again, I'll take a quick poll, and I just ask everybody to be brave. Raise your hand really high if you have seen something that you can identify in the sky that technically classifies as a UFO. Raise it real high. Don't be afraid. So look around for a second. Keep your hands up real high. Don't put them down. Would everybody agree that's half the room? As we say that, 5, 6, 7 people put their hands down. But yes, it's roughly half the room. I'm not keeping my hand up. Nobody's looking at me. It is typical to see about 60 or more % of a large room in which people have had experiences they can't understand with things in the sky. So those of you that raised your hands, let's just say that was roughly 40 people, I'd say. Raise your hand if you made a report to a reporting agency about your UFO. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people, maybe 9. There you go, Peter Davenport. There you go. This is actually an anomaly because the same question is asked many, many times, and it's almost always less than 5% of people in a room will make a report. So you have to ask yourself, if we know that roughly 40 to 60% of Americans have had experiences, and that roughly 5% or less, I would actually argue more like 2%, make those reports, how are we ever going to look at the data? How are we ever going to know what to do? How are we ever going to really be able to diagnose this and look at it with a fair and critical eye? We need to start making those reports. We need to start having conversations with people around us because nothing will change if we don't. What if society understood the more complex examples of possible contact instead of the Hollywood scripted examples that shape our understanding? Well, I think we can all agree, if you look at all the examples that we've given you today, has anybody heard a story in which something was not a positive experience for a person? And there are lots of people that have experiences and they deem them negative. Trust me on this, there are. I'm not one of these people going to sit up here and tell you that it's all gumdrops and lollipops and unicorns. But what I can tell you is a lot of people that have experiences and they don't think they're positive at all, once they start to look at it under a different light and under a different context, it's amazing how many people come around to saying, well, I guess fear was in the way. It's quite frequent, actually. How does quantum physics explain what is happening? That's really a question for you. You're going to hear some great lecturers today that are actually going to talk about that. And I would encourage all of you to start asking that question because it doesn't hurt to ask questions. It only hurts to give the wrong answer, right? The theory of a holographic reality, and I was actually talking with Kathy Martin about this yesterday. How is it that these beings come in and out of our reality, and why is it that they take the exact same year, make, and model of a vehicle that we're driving, and why? Why duplicate something that we already have involved in our reality? Well, if you look at holographic reality, look at the theory that what we are existing in is technically holographic, it could explain a lot around those things. And I'm not going to sit here and bore you with things that I know very little about. Let's be honest, I am not a quantum physicist, nor am I here to lecture about what a holographic reality is. But the belief is that everything that is within our reality is literally comprised of a holographic universe. And if that is the case, just like a computer program, things can be put in and out. And it's an absolutely fascinating study that's going on. Lastly, I would like to thank you all for being part of this lecture. This is probably the biggest group we've ever had first thing in the morning. So give yourself a round of applause. Thank you for being here this early, everybody. So who are we and how can you reach us? Please take out your smartphones right now if you're interested. I would love this. Go on Facebook and like Seacoast Saucers and like the Galileo interviews. Both of those projects we've put a lot of heart and soul into. The Galileo interviews, I do interviews with people that have had experiences that don't fit into the everyday reality. Like us on Facebook. Check out the interviews. And Seacoast Saucers, we hold meetups every month, so feel free to look on our Facebook page, like us on Facebook, and you'll know what events are coming up. On behalf of Valerie and myself, thank you very much, and we will be taking any questions relevant to what we did today. Do you want to mic? So the mic is right up there, so if anybody has a question that we can answer, feel free to walk right up and go ahead to the mic.
Yeah, it's about the woman who gave an interview, and I think maybe in your other talk you mentioned that someone else passed. So, and she looked pretty young to me. So, do you think it could her disease or passing early in any way could be related to contact?
Yeah, so Carol herself had, I think, had cancer. If you were to ask Carol, I don't think she would have said that there was any reason to believe that her cancer had anything to do with her experiences. She was presumably healthy for years, and she started losing weight about a year before she passed, and it started becoming noticeable. She fought as hard as she could. She tried alternative ways, but in the end, I don't, and I've talked to Carol many times prior to her passing, and I don't think she ever felt that way, to answer your question.
Concerning the stories you have of the incidents on the roads, how do you look at those and tell the difference between an alien encounter or a ghost? I would say it's not a demon because they're actually being helpful, or not a leprechaun because they would break the car. But how do you classify those paranormal experiences as different from each other?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Did everybody hear what he said? What he's saying is, how do you separate and classify something that's a demon, a ghost, an alien, all these things? So it's a really good question, and it's something I briefly did touch on, which is we're not here to diagnose, right? And I even made a point of saying, look, here we are, we're at a UFO festival, we're having this lecture, but we can't be guaranteed that what's happening are aliens here doing this to help these people. What we can do, and really get back to the question, I'll give you the mic in a second if you have anything to add, but I think that when we look at these examples of what's happening, we look at the Yellow Mustang story and the two other stories that were relevant to it, it's not for us to diagnose, and I think people get in a lot of trouble to diagnose these things. You will hear people on these ghost hunting shows saying, yep, this is an old dead spirit, it came back and here's what's going on. They don't know that. They suspect that. And the more that we talk about things that we don't know and we claim to know it, the more trouble we as a society can get in. So I do appreciate your question in the sense that we have to be very clear and honest. We're not saying that these are absolutely these alien abduction cases, right? We don't know. What we do know is, in all of the cases, people show up, they help the individual, they have a part, they feel helped, that all of these people have had past experiences with missing time and aliens and all sorts of strange happenings. So is it fair to draw the conclusion? Yes and no. It's fair enough that we have reason to believe these people have had past experiences, and it's also pretty clear that they're all very similar in many lights. Does that answer your question? Thank you very much.
It's not most of your questions, it's a statement. I was relayed two stories from people that I trust. And one situation was two ladies and a young man were driving in the middle of nowhere. The young gentleman did something bad with the car, and he ended up teetering on a guardrail. And they were in the middle of nowhere. And every time I talk to the story, it gives me the willies. It relates to the hologram type of thing, which I never thought about. I thought of it more as like a guardian angel. You know what I mean? But that seems to be, something that happens to people when they're in stress, when they need help. So they were teetering on this guardrail, and the gentleman walked up to the side of the car and said, "I will tell you how to get out of this car and not die." All three people got out of the car. Got out. There was no man there, in the middle of nowhere. There was nowhere for him to go, and he was gone. And then another instance where my friend...
And this is somebody you knew that was involved in that?
I knew one of the three people that was involved in the car, and she's a born-again Christian, would never tell a story that's not true. You know what I mean? And then another instance where my friend, his wife passed away, he married another woman, he had a bunch of kids, he was a hard worker. He pulled into a convenience store in downtown Worcester and bought 5 scratch tickets, and there was 5 $5 winners, which is unusual to begin with, man. You never get 5 $5 winners in a row. He went to back up his pickup truck, and he almost ran over this old lady. So, being who Dennis is, Dennis got out and went to apologize to the lady. Nowhere to be seen. Nowhere to be seen. Downtown Worcester, there was nowhere for her to go, man. He went back into the store with the $5 scratch tickets and won a $2 million scratch ticket. Those are my stories.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'd like to meet the. I'd like to see that woman if it means me getting $1 million winning scratch ticket. But I don't do that.
I wish it was me.
Yes.
Hi. Do you know people that told you that had contact with UFOs, with aliens, races? Because I wanted to share a Harvard professor, psychiatric, that he wrote books in the 70s, I think, 80s. John Mack, and also the beginning of this year, I went to a conference in Harvard where a professor in religion is writing a book. It's a woman, Diane Pasulka. She herself had encounters, and she investigated. And because she's a professor in religion her book is about what it will be religion's change of religious people's perspective after knowing that aliens exist and they are coming and contacting. And another interesting question that the students ask is, why do you think you are contact? And she says because she has special psychic powers, like most of us have, but we don't explore because we are forbidden to by religion. And so that's one reason. And also there are many people that if you start searching, that tells you that they had encounters. Like I have many stories. I went to a conference in 2015 of people that had even surgeries and miracles, like one woman that born without heels, without the bone, and then she remembers that these aliens came and put a healed her feet, and she started walking after like, I don't know how many years. I think she was a teenager already. So,
okay. I heard a bunch of stories there. Is your question what race is? I think initially you would ask the question.
The question is if you personally met somebody that told you, I met them, I talked to them, I know what is their mission. Did you?
You want to try answering that?
We've definitely met a lot of people that do believe that they've encountered specific races. I think from what we've seen, there's no one purpose for visits, for abductions, for encounters. It seems, from what I've seen, it seems to be very individual, which I think is very frustrating for a lot of people. They want an answer. They want a movie answer. They want, okay, we're here to either help you or we're here to either, to take over. But it does seem to be very individual for the person.
Because what I want to share is like many of the people that I talked that had encounters, and like there is a professor in Peru that the main message is that we humans are destroying the planet Earth, and that...
it is a very common message.
Yeah.
In fact, if you go back to you referenced John Mack. John Mack was a Harvard child psychiatrist that went to Zimbabwe in Africa in 1994, conducted interviews with numerous children, over 86, I believe, and all of these children had seen this craft with an alien, and then most of them had received very similar messages. So yeah, with that said, I want to thank you all for your time. Thank you for your great questions. And if you have any further questions, we will be around here today. Feel free to find us, and we hope to see you all tonight and meet the speakers. Thank you very much for your time.